The ground you are looking at is older than almost anything you will ever stand on. Under this thin skin of leaves and moss lies rock that cooled roughly 2.7 billion years ago, when the continents themselves were only beginning to gather. Today the birch and aspen are gold, the air smells of cold water, and a narrow footpath leads away into the trees. This is the Club Trail in Bear Head Lake State Park, on the edge of the Boundary Waters. We are in St. Louis County, in the far northeast corner of Minnesota, about 10 miles from the town of Ely, and only a short distance from the boundary of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. Bear Head Lake State Park covers roughly 4,300 acres of forest, bog, and water. Canada lies just to the north. Lake Superior lies to the southeast. This is the very southern lip of a landscape that runs unbroken to the Arctic. The trail has a curious name. Every Minnesota state park sets aside one route as its hiking club trail, a designated loop with a signpost hidden about halfway along carrying a single password. The program began in 1991, in the centennial year of the state park system, and people have been quietly collecting those passwords ever since. So this path is a walk, and it is also an invitation. Follow it, and the park tells you what it wants you to see. What it wants you to see first is stone. Northeastern Minnesota is the southern edge of the Canadian Shield, a vast exposed core of ancient continental crust that curves around Hudson Bay across most of eastern Canada. Elsewhere in the world, rock this old lies buried under miles of younger sediment. Here the ice stripped the cover away and left the basement floor of a continent lying open to the weather. Every bare gray outcrop beside this trail is a piece of that floor. It is hard to hold a number like 2.7 billion in the mind, so try it this way. If the whole history of the Earth were one calendar year, this rock would have formed in early summer, and every human being who has ever lived would arrive in the final seconds before midnight. The lichen on it is a few decades old. The forest around it is about a century old. The rock has simply been here, patient, through everything. The most famous rock in this corner of the state carries the name of the nearest town. The Ely Greenstone is a body of ancient volcanic rock, dated to roughly 2.7 billion years, and it is one of the oldest exposed rocks in North America. It began as basaltic lava erupting onto a sea floor. Where lava meets cold water, it chills into rounded lobes, and near Ely you can still see those pillows, stacked and frozen in the open rock. The green in Greenstone is not decoration. The lava was buried, heated and squeezed, and its minerals recrystallized into chlorite, actinolite and epidote, minerals that carry a dull green in their crystal structure. Geologists read those pillow shapes as evidence that this place was once a chain of volcanic islands in an open ocean, something like the Arc of Japan today. The bedrock of Bear Head Lake State Park is partly that greenstone belt, and partly an old granite to the east. That same ancient world left another gift, and it would decide the human history of everything you can see. In the Archean seas, iron dissolved freely in oxygen-poor water. As early life began releasing oxygen, that iron reacted and settled to the sea floor in fine dark layers, over and over for a very long time. The result is banded iron formation. It is rust from a young planet, laid down in stripes, and the north of this state is built on it. Between that ancient sea floor and the forest we are walking through lies a gap almost too large to describe. Mountains rose here and were ground flat. Seas came and went. The rock was worn down again and again until what remained was a low, hard, scoured plain. When the story picks up again in a geological sense, it is barely a moment ago. It is the ice. Through the last 2 million years, ice sheets grew and collapsed across this continent many times over. The last of them, the Laurentide, buried Minnesota under glaciers thousands of feet thick, and by around 11,000 years ago it had mostly withdrawn from the state, with lobes of ice still lingering in the north. Here the ice did not build. It scraped. It hauled away the soil and gouged the fractures in the ancient rock into basins. That is why this country looks the way it does. The water is not sitting in soft valleys. It is sitting in scratches in the bedrock, which is why the lakes here are long and angular and follow the grain of the stone. In this park, the glacial deposits are only about 4 feet deep in places. 4 feet of gravel and then 2.5 billion years of continent. The soil is thin. The trees know it. Behind the retreating ice came tundra, then spruce, then the mixed forest we walk in now. Northern Minnesota sits on a seam, an ecological transition where the boreal forest of Canada, spruce and fir and jack pine and paper birch, meets the temperate hardwoods of the south. More than 2 million acres of that boreal forest reach down into this state, near the southern limit of their range. The gold and the dark green beside this trail are 2 different worlds overlapping. That overlap is exactly what makes early October here so extravagant. The aspen and birch flare yellow. The maples further south run red. The conifers stay black-green and do not participate at all. The result is not a wall of color but a mosaic gold pooled around islands of evergreen, and all of it reflected in water that is already turning cold. Peak color in this part of the state usually lands in the last days of September and the first days of October. This forest is the homeland of the Ojibwe, who call themselves Anishinaabe, and it is not a homeland in the past tense. The nearest community is the Boys Forte Band of Chippewa, whose Ojibwe name, Zagakwandigawaniniwag, refers to the people of the thick, dense woods. They are here now, governing, harvesting, teaching the language. The lakes north and west of us have been rice lakes, fishing lakes and travel routes for generations, and they still are. Look at how the lakes connect. In a landscape of rock and swamp, Water was never an obstacle. It was the road. A canoe could carry a family and a season of food, and the short portages between lakes stitched the whole country into a network that ran for hundreds of miles. Everything that happened here afterwards, the fur trade, the border, the mines, the wilderness fight, follows the shape of that older map. When French and then British traders pushed inland, they did not invent a route. They borrowed one, traveling by birch bark canoe along the same chain of lakes. That is why the international boundary between Minnesota and Ontario wanders the way it does. It follows a canoe route. The border out here is not a line drawn on a table in a European capital. It is the memory of a portage trail written into a treaty. For the Ojibwe, the arrival of the United States meant treaties, and treaties meant loss. In 1854, in a treaty signed at La Pointe, the bands of this region ceded an enormous area of what is now northeastern Minnesota, while keeping the right to hunt, fish, and gather on the ceded land. The Bois Forte were promised a reservation in the country they knew best, around Lake Vermilion, just west of where this trail runs. Then came the rumor of gold. In 1865, prospectors reached Lake Vermilion and a small rush followed. Almost no gold was ever found. Much of what excited them turned out to be iron pyrite, fool's gold, locked in quartz. But the rush had done its work. In 1866, a new treaty was pressed on the Bois Forte, and the promised Lake Vermilion reservation was surrendered in exchange for land at Net Lake, to the west. The bitter joke of it is that the prospectors were standing on a fortune and they walked past it. The gold was a fantasy. The iron was real and it was everywhere, sitting in those ancient banded layers. Within 20 years, the same ground that had disappointed a gold rush would launch one of the largest mining industries on the continent. The rock had simply been asked the wrong question. The answer came at Sawden near Tower on the western edge of the Vermilion Range, about 20 miles from here. The Sawden mine opened in 1884, the first iron mine in Minnesota. On the 30th of July that year, the new Duluth and Iron Range Railway reached the mine, and the following day it carried out almost 3,000 tons of ore, bound for 2 harbors on Lake Superior. Minnesota's mining age began with that train. Sawden started as an open pit because the ore lay close to the surface. As the diggers went deeper, the walls became dangerous, and the work moved underground, following the ore down into the shield through shafts and drifts. The mine ran year after year until it closed in December 1962, having shipped more than 15 million tons. It is a state park now. The deepest levels hold a physics laboratory, shielded from cosmic rays by half a mile of Archean rock. Ely itself was born the same way. The railway pushed on from Tower, and in 1888 the Chandler mine opened. The Pioneer followed in 1889, then the Savoy, the Zenith, and the Sibley. The Pioneer became the richest of them all, producing around 41 million tons, roughly 40% of everything the Vermilion Range ever yielded. Finns, Slovenes, Italians, Cornishmen, and Scandinavians came for the work, and a mining town grew out of the woods. Vermilion was only the beginning. In 1892, the Mesabi Range shipped its first ore, and the Mesabi turned out to be enormous, a body of iron so vast and so easy to scoop from the surface that it reshaped American industry. The Canoe Range followed, shipping from 1911. Steel for railways, for cities, for 2 world wars came out of northern Minnesota. The country you are walking through paid for a great deal of the 20th century. Nothing lasts. The rich natural ores thinned and mining turned to taconite, a lower-grade rock that has to be crushed and concentrated into pellets. Underground mining, meanwhile, had simply become too costly in labor. Ely's last working mine, the Pioneer, shut in April 1967, not because the ore was gone, but because it no longer paid to send people down after it. A town built on iron had to find another reason to exist. Iron was not the only industry to reach this exact ground. Logging arrived at Bear Head Lake around 1895, and a sawmill stood on the south shore from about 1907 until 1911. Then, between 1911 and 1913, fire swept the cut-over land, burning through the slash the loggers had left behind. The forest that surrounds this trail today is what grew back afterwards. It is not old, it is a recovery. If you look off the trail into the undergrowth, you can still find the evidence. Blackened stumps, cut flat by a saw and then scorched by fire, sitting in the moss more than a century later. That is the whole story of this park in a single object. A great pine felled, the waste burned, the land abandoned, and then 100 quiet years of birch and aspen and spruce moving back in over the ashes. While the mines were running, another argument was starting. As early as 1926, the Secretary of Agriculture set aside a large roadless area inside the Superior National Forest, the forest Theodore Roosevelt had established in 1909. Then in 1930, President Hoover signed the Shipstead-Nolan Act, which limited logging near the shorelines and prohibited altering water levels in this region. It is often described as the first law Congress ever passed specifically to preserve wilderness. The most persuasive voice in that argument lived in Ely. Sigurd Olson came to town in 1922 to teach biology and guided canoe parties in the summers. He gave up teaching in 1947 to write, and his first book, The Singing Wilderness, appeared in 1956. He argued, patiently and for decades, that this country was worth more left whole than used up, and he made a great many people believe it. In 1964, Congress passed the Wilderness Act, and the Boundary Waters Canoe area became part of the new National Wilderness Preservation System. But the law carved out exceptions here. Motorboats and logging were not fully excluded, and for 14 more years the question of what this place actually was, a wilderness or a working forest with rules, stayed unresolved. In a town whose living came from resources, that question was not academic, it was personal. The fight that followed was genuinely bitter. Local people who had motored and logged and guided here for generations felt they were being written out of their own country. Others believed the last great canoe wilderness in the United States was being nibbled away. In October 1978, President Carter signed the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness Act, which ended most logging, restricted motors to a limited set of lakes, and brought the wilderness to just over 1 million acres. So Ely became something new. The mines closed and the outfitters opened. A town that had sent iron to the world began sending canoes north instead, and it now calls itself the gateway to the Boundary Waters. It is worth being honest about the cost of that. A guiding season does not pay what an underground mine paid. The peace we walk through here was not free, and not everyone who lives nearby chose it. The wilderness has its own opinions about permanence. On the 4th of July, 1999, a derecho, a straight-line windstorm, tore across the Canoe country with gusts over 90 miles an hour. It flattened forest across hundreds of thousands of acres of the wilderness and the surrounding national forest. One person was killed and dozens were injured. Whole ridges of trees went down in minutes. The forest is still working through what that storm rearranged. All summer these leaves were green with chlorophyll, the pigment that gathers sunlight. As the nights lengthen, the tree stops maintaining it, and as the chlorophyll breaks down the yellows and oranges that were always present, the carotenoids are finally revealed. The reds are different. Those are anthocyanins, made fresh in autumn when sugars trapped in the leaf react. Warm, bright days and cold nights just above freezing produce the most vivid color of all. Listen for what is missing. In September, the adult loons pull out, trading these lakes for the Atlantic coast from the Carolinas down to Florida or for the Gulf. They swap their black and white summer plumage for a plain gray winter coat, and they will come back in spring to the same lake out of thousands. Their calls have gone quiet by now. What is left on the water in October is wind and a great deal of silence. This is also one of the last places in the lower 48 states where wolves never disappeared. Northern Minnesota holds a wolf population in the low thousands, and this park lies inside their range. Moose are the harder story. Northeastern Minnesota once held several thousand more than it does now, and the population has fallen sharply since the mid-2000s, pressured by warming winters, parasites carried by deer, and predation on calves. And the old question has come back. Beneath the ground upstream of the wilderness lies copper, nickel, and precious metals in sulfide ore, which can generate acid when exposed to air and water. Companies have sought to mine it. Federal leases were canceled in 2022. A 20-year mining moratorium was placed on more than 200,000 acres of the Rainy River watershed in 2023, and both have since been contested in Washington. It is genuinely unresolved. Here on the club trail, none of that is visible. There is only the sound of leaves, the smell of cold water and pine, and a path bending back toward the lake. Bear Head Lake became a state park in 1961, dedicated the following June, and in 2010 it was voted America's favorite park in a national online vote, which is a strange and rather touching fate for a quiet corner of the North Woods. What stays with you is the layering. 2.7-billion-year-old lava under 4 feet of glacial gravel, under a forest that grew back from fire, in a homeland that is still lived in, beside a wilderness that people are still arguing over. This trail is short. What it crosses is not. Thank you for watching. Follow for more trails of the world.